Picture this. You're a game developer. It's December 11th, 2023. 4 days ago, your studio launched the most anticipated game on Steam. 500,000 people watched the stream. Then, nothing. No patch notes, no dev blog, no warning. Just a message on Twitter. The company is officially closing. You didn't write that message. You didn't even know it was coming. And somewhere, right now, 2 men who built this studio are already gone. Not fired, not arrested, just gone. Where did they go? And where did the money go with them? This is the story of a video game that made almost 500,000 people believe in something that was never real. And the 2 brothers who walked away from the wreckage without a scratch. Let's go back. 2015, 2 brothers from Yakutia in the Russian Far East, Eduard and Isen Gotovtsev, not veteran developers, not industry names, students with an idea. Their first real project was called The Wild 8, a frozen survival game. Small scope. Actually kind of charming. They crowdfunded it, got a publisher, released it into early access in 2017. Then, 9 months later, they abandoned it. Sold the rights, walked away. That would become a pattern, but nobody was watching that closely yet. Because in February 2021, Fntastic announced something bigger, much bigger. A game called The Day Before. The pitch, an open-world survival MMO zombies. A collapsed America. A city called New Fortune City, rebuilt by whoever was left. The trailer looked like it belonged in a $200 million budget. Environments that looked ripped from The Last of Us. Traffic and crowds that looked like The Division. And that similarity, that wasn't a coincidence. We'll come back to that. People didn't just want this game, they needed it to be real. By May 2022, The Day Before became the single most wish-listed game on all of Steam, ahead of sequels, ahead of AAA giants, ahead of everything. A tiny, unknown studio from Russia had built the most desired game on the planet's biggest storefront. On paper, this was a fairy tale, a scrappy indie team about to outlaunch the industry's biggest publishers. Underneath, something was already rotting. Here's the first thing that should have worried everyone. In June 2022, Fntastic quietly updated their website. They described their team as an organization of volunteers. Some paid, many not. The unpaid ones were compensated with something called participation certificates and free copies of the game they were building for free. When journalists pushed back, Fntastic's response wasn't an apology. It was almost philosophical. Volunteering, they said, means that a person works willingly for a common cause. Former developers would later tell a very different story. Long, unpaid overtime. One developer reportedly begging for a break just to shower and eat. Employees fined for unsatisfactory work. In one case, over $1,900 docked from a voice actor for a performance the founders didn't like. Workers recruited from small towns in Russia with few other options in game development. Desperate people, building someone else's dream for free. Then came the second problem, the plagiarism accusations. Some of Fntastic's promotional voiceovers sounded suspiciously close to lines from Red Dead Redemption 2 and Cyberpunk 2077. Side-by-side comparisons started circulating. The similarities weren't subtle. And according to former staff, the game's actual design was reportedly reshaped constantly, not by a creative director, not by a design document, but by whatever the Gotovtsev brothers happened to be playing that month. GTA Online, then Hogwarts Legacy, then Baldur's Gate 3. One developer later said they didn't even know they were supposedly building an MMO until they saw it described that way in a trailer. So that visual DNA everyone recognized from other games, The Last of Us, The Division, it wasn't inspiration. Former staff describe it as direct imitation, chasing whatever the founders were personally obsessed with that week. Then came the trademark disaster. In January 2023, The Day Before's Steam page vanished. Fntastic claimed they'd never trademarked their own game's title. A company making a calendar app, coincidentally also called The Day Before, had a legal claim to the name. The game disappeared from Steam for 9 months over it. Release, once set for spring, slid to November, then to December 7th, 2023. 3 years after the initial reveal. Almost 3 years of trailers. Zero playable proof for the public. By now, the internet had a nickname for it. Vaporware. A scam. A game that would never actually exist. Fntastic's answer, days before release, was a public statement. They insisted this wasn't a scam, insisted it wasn't an asset flip. They wrote that they'd worked day and night for 5 years to make their dream real. Please, they asked, don't underestimate our work. 5 days later, the public would get their answer anyway. December 7th, 2023. The Day Before goes live on Steam Early Access. $40 a copy. Within hours, over 400,000 people are watching on Twitch. 30,000 players are online at once. For one single day, the dream looks real. Then people actually start playing it. The open-world survival MMO, the one promised for 3 years, isn't an MMO at all. Servers cap out under 100 players. No clans, no raids, no persistent world shared by thousands, the way an MMO is supposed to work. What players get instead is a small-scale extraction shooter. Buggy. Half-finished, barely populated. Zombies that barely function. Servers that crash mid-session. Environments that feel copy-pasted from asset packs, not handcrafted for a next-gen survival epic. Within days, roughly 200,000 copies had sold, and nearly half of those buyers were already requesting refunds. Steam had to waive its usual refund restrictions just to keep up. Review scores collapsed to mostly negative, among the worst launches Steam had seen that year. The community wasn't just disappointed, they felt lied to. 3 years of trailers for a game that reportedly was never designed to be what those trailers promised. And here's the part almost nobody clocked in the chaos of launch week. The 2 men who built this studio had already stopped answering anyone. The Gotovtsev brothers, according to multiple former employees, had gone quiet right around launch. No public statements, no interviews, just silence, while their remaining staff tried to patch a burning building with a game that was already dying in the reviews. December 11th, 2023, 4 days after launch, Fntastic posts a statement. Today, we announce the closure of the Fntastic studio. The reason given, the Day Before, had failed financially. All remaining income, they said, was going toward paying off debts to partners. They emphasized one thing very deliberately. They'd never taken pre-orders, crowdfunding, or early access money before release. Technically true, but the studio had just sold roughly 200,000 copies at $40 each in the 4 days before shutting down. That's several $1 million collected in less than a week from a game the studio already knew was collapsing. Within hours of the announcement, the entire Fntastic website was wiped, replaced with a single static image announcing the closure. The Day Before's YouTube channel, years of trailers, dev diaries, hype videos, scrubbed completely. Gone, like the studio was trying to erase its own paper trail in real time. When one furious player confronted the studio online, the reply was almost casually cold. This was our first big experience. Shh, happens. So, where did the money actually go? A leaked internal message, reportedly from Eduard Gotovtsev himself, later circulated among former staff, describing roughly 200,000 units sold and about 90,000 of those already refunded. One ex-developer speculated that publisher Mytona had simply pulled its remaining funding and that the founders didn't think the CEOs got any money from sales once refunds and debts were accounted for. But no public accounting was ever released. To this day, nobody outside Fntastic knows the real number. The Day Before was pulled from Steam sale that same day. Its servers limped along for another 6 weeks. On January 22nd, 2024, they were shut down permanently. The game that was once the most wish-listed title on the entire platform ceased to exist a little over a month after it launched. And the brothers who built it? According to former staff, they resurfaced almost immediately, not to apologize, not to explain, but to quietly invite willing developers to join a brand new studio, one reportedly making mobile games. SteamDB would later show something curious. The publisher listing for Fntastic's older game, The Wild 8, had quietly changed. New name, 8 Points, changed the very same day the shutdown was announced. Here's where the story gets stranger than most canceled game documentaries. Fntastic didn't disappear. In September 2024, they resurfaced publicly with something they called Fntastic 2.0. A statement, an apology, a PDF outlining a plan for recovery. They promised to stop using unpaid volunteers, to hire actual paid professionals. Then they launched a Kickstarter for a new game, a physics-based game about factory workers escaping deadly traps. It raised a small fraction of its goal in the first week. Then came another game. Then a mobile title, launched quietly, then shut down after a soft launch, with refunds issued down to the last cent, according to their own statement. Then, in 2026, yet another announcement, a new project, teased through their Discord, funded by their own admission through mobile games. Some community members have compared the funding structure to a chain, one game funding the next, none of them ever quite finishing. So the studio that erased its own website, scrubbed its own YouTube channel, and vanished the day it collapsed, never actually stopped operating. It just kept building new names, new logos, new promises, on top of the wreckage of the last one. No refund lawsuit ever forced a full public accounting of where the day before's money went. No regulator stepped in. The Yakutia brothers, as far as public record shows, faced no legal consequence for any of it. They simply kept making games. The day before wasn't just a bad game. It was a masterclass in building hype out of nothing and walking away before anyone could ask for their money back. And maybe that's the real horror story of the gaming industry. Not the monsters on screen. The ones who build the hype, take the money, and disappear before the credits even roll. If a studio can vanish overnight and just start again under a new name, did it ever really fail at all, or did it just finish the job it came to do?